Nathan's gaze froze when he saw her walk into the ballroom, and in that moment, he knew he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Nathan Reynolds had built an empire from nothing. At 38 years old, he was the youngest and most ruthless CEO in all of New York, with a fortune that made his competitors tremble and a reputation as a merciless man that preceded each of his appearances. The offices of Reynolds Industries occupied the top 10 floors of the most modern building in Manhattan, with privileged views that perfectly reflected their owner's position, above everyone else. Nathan didn't know the word failure, didn't understand the concept of weakness, and definitely didn't have time for the unnecessary emotions that distracted ordinary people from their goals. For him, the world was divided into two simple categories: those who conquered and those who served. And Rachel Morgan, his personal assistant for the past 3 years, definitely belonged to the second category. Rachel was everything Nathan considered ordinary. She arrived every morning at 7 o'clock sharp with his coffee perfectly prepared, organized his schedule with almost robotic efficiency, anticipated his needs before he expressed them, and disappeared from his sight when she was no longer needed. For Nathan, Rachel was simply part of the office furniture, as important as his Italian mahogany desk, but equally invisible. He had never stopped to really look at the woman who spent more hours with him than any other person in his life. He didn't notice how her hands trembled slightly every time he raised his voice, didn't see how she lowered her gaze when he deliberately ignored her in meetings, and definitely didn't pay attention to the glimmer of determination that sometimes crossed her brown eyes when she thought no one was watching. If you're enjoying this story, leave us a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell us what part of the world you're watching from. Your opinion is very important to us and helps us create more content you'll love. That October morning began like any other. Rachel entered Nathan's office in her gray pantsuit that had seen better days, her chestnut hair pulled back in a tight bun that seemed designed to go unnoticed, and her thick-framed glasses that hid much of her face. She set the coffee on the desk without making a sound, placed the day's documents organized by priority, and was about to leave when Nathan's sharp voice stopped her in her tracks. These numbers are wrong," he declared without even looking up from his screen, pushing a report toward her with a dismissive gesture. "Can't you even do the most basic tasks correctly, Morgan? My 12-year-old nephew could do a better job." Rachel felt the heat rise up her neck, that familiar humiliation she knew so well, but she maintained her composure. "Mr. Reynolds, those numbers were provided directly by the finance department. I only compiled the information exactly as you requested." "I don't care where they came from," Nathan interrupted coldly, finally deigning to look at her with those gray eyes that seemed capable of freezing one's soul. "Your job is to make sure everything that reaches my desk is perfect. If the finance department makes mistakes, it's your responsibility to catch them and correct them before bringing them to me. That's what I pay you for. Or do I need to explain the basic functions of your position?" The words fell like sharpened knives, designed not only to correct but to hurt, to remind her of her place in the invisible hierarchy Nathan had constructed in his mind. Rachel clenched her fists at her sides, feeling her nails dig into her palms, a small physical pain that helped contain the much larger pain growing in her chest. For 3 years she had endured this. The constant humiliations, the contemptuous comments, the way Nathan treated her as if she were less than nothing, as if her intelligence, her dedication, and her countless hours of overtime meant absolutely nothing. "I'll make the corrections immediately, Mr. Reynolds," she responded with a voice that trembled barely perceptibly, gathering the documents and turning toward the door before he could see the tears threatening to escape from her eyes. "And Morgan," Nathan's voice reached her just as her hand touched the doorknob. "The company's annual gala is this Saturday. Make sure everything is perfectly organized. And please, try to look presentable. I don't want international investors thinking we hire just anyone." The blow was direct and brutal, designed to remind her that even her appearance was grounds for criticism and disappointment. Rachel didn't respond, didn't trust her voice in that moment, simply left the office, closing the door with more force than necessary, allowing herself that small act of rebellion that Nathan probably wouldn't even notice. What Nathan didn't know, what he had never bothered to discover, was that Rachel Morgan was much more than what he saw. Behind those thick glasses and those deliberately conservative suits hid a brilliant woman who had finished her MBA with the highest grades in her class. A woman who had turned down offers from major competitors because, absurdly, she still held on to the hope that someday Nathan would really see her, that he would recognize her value beyond being simply someone who brought him coffee and organized his schedule. For 3 years, Rachel had been silently in love with a man who treated her as if she were invisible, and for 3 years she had convinced herself that if she worked hard enough, if she was perfect enough, he would finally notice her. But that morning, as she sat at her small desk outside Nathan's office with her hands still trembling and her heart broken into 1,000 pieces, something changed inside Rachel. A spark of anger replaced resignation. An iron determination substituted naive hope. Nathan Reynolds wanted her to look presentable for the company gala. Very well, she would give him exactly what he asked for, but on her own terms. Rachel took her phone and dialed a number she had been saving for months, the contact of her best friend from college, Sarah, who was now a successful celebrity personal stylist in Los Angeles. "Sarah," she said when her friend answered, "I need your help, and I need it to be a complete transformation." Meanwhile, in his office, Nathan had completely forgotten the exchange with Rachel. He was focused on negotiations to acquire a rival company, a strategic move that would consolidate his position as the most powerful businessman in the industry. People like Rachel were simply useful tools on his path to success, interchangeable and without real importance. He had a meeting with the Harrison brothers that afternoon, 2 important businessmen who were considering investing millions in his next project, and he needed to be completely prepared. What Nathan didn't know was that the Harrison brothers, specifically the younger one, Philip, had noticed Rachel on one of his previous visits to the office. He had seen beyond the carefully constructed facade of invisibility, had recognized the sharp intelligence in her brief comments, the natural elegance in her movements despite the wardrobe designed to conceal. Philip had discreetly asked about her, had found out she would be at the company gala, and had made the decision to approach her that night. He had no idea that this simple decision would trigger a series of events that would change everything. The rest of the week passed in a fog of preparations. Rachel worked during the day with her usual efficiency, enduring Nathan's contemptuous comments without blinking. But at night she transformed. Sarah had come from Los Angeles and had taken on Rachel's transformation project with the enthusiasm of an artist before a blank canvas. Together they visited exclusive boutiques, high-end beauty salons, and Sarah shared all her professional secrets about how to highlight the natural beauty Rachel had been hiding for years. "I don't understand why you've been hiding yourself this way," Sarah commented as they worked on Rachel's new wardrobe. "You're beautiful, intelligent, talented. Why waste all that on a man who clearly doesn't know how to value you?" Rachel smiled sadly as she looked at herself in the mirror, already seeing the first changes in her appearance. "I guess I thought that if I looked ordinary, my professional skills would speak for themselves. I wanted to be taken seriously, not just seen as a pretty face." "Honey," Sarah responded with a mixture of tenderness and exasperation, "you can be beautiful and brilliant at the same time. You don't have to choose. And any man who can't see both doesn't deserve another second of your time." The words resonated deeply with Rachel. For years she had been living according to others' expectations, trying to fit into the mold of what she believed Nathan wanted from an executive assistant. But no more. The company gala would be her declaration of independence, her way of reminding herself that she was worth much more than the treatment she had been accepting. Friday night, Rachel found herself alone in her apartment, looking at the dress hanging in her closet. It was an impressive creation in midnight blue that Sarah had insisted she buy, despite the price that had made her bank account tremble. The dress fit her body perfectly in all the right places, with an elegant but daring neckline, and a skirt that flowed like water with every movement. It was completely different from anything Rachel had ever worn before, and that was precisely why she had bought it. As she prepared everything for the next day, Rachel felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She wasn't doing this for revenge, although she admitted there was a small pleasure in the idea that Nathan would finally really see her. She was doing this for herself, to recover the confidence she had lost under years of constant belittlement, to remind herself that she was more than just the invisible assistant of an arrogant tycoon. What Rachel didn't know was that Nathan was also preparing for the gala, though in a completely different way. He had invited his usual companion for these events, a model named Victoria, with whom he maintained a superficial relationship that worked perfectly for both. She got the exposure of being seen with him at high-profile events, and he got a beautiful partner who impressed his business associates without the emotional complications of a real relationship. Nathan had perfected the art of keeping people at a distance, of never allowing anyone to get close enough to really touch him. In his penthouse with panoramic views of Manhattan, Nathan was meticulously preparing for the event. Every detail of his appearance was carefully considered: the custom-made tuxedo that accentuated his athletic physique, the Swiss watch that cost more than a luxury car, the perfectly styled hair that made him look powerful and accessible at the same time. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw exactly what he wanted to see: a man who had conquered the business world, who needed nothing and no one, who was completely self-sufficient in his success and his solitude. But while Nathan admired himself in the mirror, completely satisfied with what he saw, he had no idea that in less than 24 hours, that carefully constructed image of himself would begin to crack. He didn't know he was about to discover that the person he had most belittled was exactly the person he could least afford to lose. And he definitely didn't know that tomorrow's company gala wouldn't be just another corporate event, but the beginning of the most painful and transformative lesson of his life. Saturday dawned with clear skies and a cool breeze that promised a perfect evening. Rachel woke up early, despite the event not starting until 8 p.m., feeling butterflies in her stomach that she hadn't experienced in years. Sarah arrived mid-afternoon, loaded with her cases of professional products and an unwavering determination to make this night unforgettable. "All right, honey," Sarah announced as she began to unpack. "Get ready for the transformation of your life. When I'm done with you, that idiot boss of yours won't know which way is up." The transformation took hours. Sarah worked on Rachel's hair with the precision of a surgeon, cutting damaged ends, adding layers that framed her face in a completely new way. The natural chestnut color was enriched with subtle highlights that caught the light, and the final style was a cascade of soft waves falling over her shoulders, completely different from the tight bun that had been her signature for years. Then came the makeup, applied with such skill that it enhanced Rachel's natural beauty without looking excessive. Lined eyes that seemed larger and more expressive, lips in a natural rose tone that added a touch of sophistication. But it was when Rachel finally put on the dress that the transformation was truly complete. The midnight blue complemented her skin tone perfectly, making her seem to glow from within. The dress's cut accentuated a figure Rachel had been hiding under conservative clothing for years, revealing elegant curves and a natural grace that had always been there, waiting to be recognized. When Sarah added the final touches, simple but elegant silver earrings, a delicate bracelet, and heeled shoes that made her feel like she could conquer the world, Rachel could barely recognize herself in the mirror. "My God," Sarah whispered, stepping back to admire her work. "You're absolutely stunning. How is it possible you've been hiding all this?" Rachel looked at herself in the full-length mirror and felt tears threatening to ruin the perfectly applied makeup. The woman looking back at her from the reflection was someone she had forgotten existed: confident, beautiful, powerful. It wasn't that she had fundamentally changed, but rather that she was finally allowing herself to be seen as she really was, without the layers of protection she had been using as armor against a world that didn't seem to value her. "Thank you, Sarah," Rachel said with emotion breaking her voice. Not just for this, but for reminding me who I really am. You're welcome, honey, Sarah responded, hugging her carefully so as not to wrinkle the dress. Now go there and remind all of them, especially that idiot boss of yours, that you're a force of nature not to be underestimated. The Grand Emperor Hotel, where Reynolds Industries' annual gala was being held, was a historic building in the heart of Manhattan that had been completely reserved for the occasion. Lights shone against the stone facade, and a red carpet extended from the entrance to the street, where guests began arriving in their luxury cars. Professional photographers captured each entrance, and the buzz of excited conversations filled the air as company employees, along with important investors and business partners, prepared for a night of celebration. Nathan had arrived early, as was his custom, with Victoria on his arm. She was, as always, a vision of physical perfection, a red dress that hugged every curve, blonde hair falling in perfect waves, and a professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. As they greeted guests and Nathan chatted with important partners, part of him was distracted, though he didn't know exactly why. He had checked his phone several times, a nervous habit that wasn't characteristic of him, waiting for some message from Rachel confirming that all the event details were perfect. But he hadn't received anything, which was strange considering how meticulous she normally was with these things. "Are you okay?" Victoria asked with a slightly bored expression, clearly more interested in the cameras than in her companion. "Do you perfectly," Nathan responded with that cutting tone he used when he didn't want to deepen a conversation. "I'm just wondering where my assistant is. Normally she makes sure I'm aware of any last-minute details." Victoria shrugged indifferently. Maybe for once she decided to enjoy the event instead of working. Or do you expect everyone to live only to serve you? The comment had an edge of criticism that Nathan chose to ignore. Instead, he focused on the conversation with the Harrison brothers, who had just arrived. Lawrence, the elder, was a shrewd 50-year-old businessman, while Philip, the younger, was 32 with a reputation for being both brilliant and unpredictable. "Nathan," Lawrence greeted with a firm handshake, "impressive event as always. Your company really knows how to organize a celebration." "All credit goes to my team," Nathan responded with false modesty, though internally he took all the credit himself. "Especially my personal assistant, though curiously I haven't seen her yet tonight." "Your assistant?" Philip asked with genuine interest. "Do you mean Rachel Morgan?" Nathan looked at him surprised. You know her. I've seen her on some of my visits to your office," Philip explained. "She struck me as a very intelligent woman. In fact, I was hoping to talk more with her tonight." Something uncomfortable churned in Nathan's stomach at that comment, a feeling he couldn't identify and chose to ignore. "Well, if you see her before I do, tell her to find me. There are some matters I need to discuss with her." The conversation was interrupted by a palpable change in the ballroom's atmosphere. The murmur of voices gradually faded, replaced by an expectant silence, and Nathan noticed that practically all eyes had turned toward the main entrance. Curious despite himself, he followed the direction of all those gazes and felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. A woman had entered the ballroom, and stunning was too poor a word to describe her. The midnight blue dress flowed around her body like water, catching the light from the crystal chandeliers and seeming to glow with life of its own. Her hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, framing a face of classic beauty that took Nathan completely off guard. But it was when she lifted her gaze and her eyes met his across the crowded ballroom that Nathan felt as if he'd been hit in the chest with the full force of a hammer. It was Rachel. His Rachel. Except it wasn't his Rachel at all, because he had never really seen her until this moment, had never noticed the natural elegance in the way she moved, the brilliant intelligence in her eyes, the subtle smile playing on her lips as if she held a wonderful secret. All the air seemed to leave his lungs as he watched her, unable to fully process what he was seeing, unable to reconcile this dazzling vision with the woman he had been treating with contempt for 3 years. If you're enjoying this story and want to see more content like this, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Each subscription helps us continue creating stories that touch your heart. Holy God, Philip murmured beside him. That's Rachel Morgan. I knew there was something special about her. But this... The comment snapped Nathan out of his trance, and a completely unknown and fiercely intense emotion seized him. Jealousy, rage, possessiveness, a toxic mixture of feelings he had no right to feel, but that consumed him anyway. He watched, with a growing sense of disbelief and something that felt dangerously like panic, as Philip separated from his group and walked directly toward Rachel with a confident smile. "Miss Morgan," Nathan heard Philip say when he was close enough, his voice warm and genuinely interested in a way Nathan had never used with her. "You look absolutely radiant tonight. Would you allow me the honor of buying you a drink?" Rachel smiled, and it was a smile Nathan had never seen before, open, genuine, full of a confidence that lit up her entire face. "Mr. Harrison?" she responded with a voice softer and more melodious than Nathan remembered. "It would be a pleasure." As he watched them walk together toward the bar, Nathan felt as if he were watching a scene from an alternate reality. Other men in the ballroom had also noticed Rachel, their gazes following her with barely disguised admiration. Leonard Foster, the vice president of operations, approached to greet her with a smile that was too warm to be purely professional. Stephen Nash, one of the company's most important investors, practically tripped over his own feet trying to get her attention. Even some of the younger employees, who had never paid her attention before, now looked at her as if they had just discovered a hidden treasure. And through it all, Rachel moved with a grace and confidence that left Nathan completely bewildered. She conversed with ease, laughed with a freedom she had never shown in the office, and shone with a light that seemed to draw everyone toward her like moths to a flame. It was as if the woman he knew, the silent and obedient assistant who shrank under his criticism, had been only a shadow of who she really was. "Who is that woman?" Victoria asked beside him, her interest finally awakened by something other than cameras. "Every man in this place can't stop staring at her. She's my assistant," Nathan responded, the words coming out with difficulty, as if acknowledging it aloud made it more real. Victoria looked at him with disbelief. "That's your assistant, the one you always describe as efficient but ordinary. Nathan, you're either blind or an idiot." Probably both, Nathan thought bitterly as he continued watching Rachel from a distance. She was now in deep conversation with Philip, and the way the businessman leaned toward her, completely captivated by what she was saying, made something dark and possessive twist in Nathan's chest. Without really thinking about what he was doing, Nathan began walking toward them, his intention unclear even to himself. He only knew he needed to... What exactly? Interrupt their conversation, remind Rachel that she was his employee, warn Philip to stay away. None of these options made rational sense, but rationality seemed to have completely abandoned Nathan in this moment. Just as he was about to reach them, Rachel looked up and her eyes met his directly. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Nathan expected to see the usual expression she had when looking at him in the office, that flash of hope mixed with resignation, that vulnerability that had always been there, but that he had never wanted to acknowledge. But what he saw instead left him completely frozen. There was no hope in Rachel's eyes. There wasn't the admiration she used to hide poorly when she thought he wasn't looking. There was nothing of the Rachel he knew. Instead, there was a woman who looked at him with polite coldness, as she would look at a stranger on the street. And then, before Nathan could react, she simply looked away and returned her attention to Philip, as if Nathan were completely irrelevant to her. The casual dismissal of that gesture was more painful than anything Nathan had experienced in his professional life. All the lost acquisitions, all the failed negotiations, all the rejections he had faced on his way to the top, none of them had felt like this, like something fundamental and essential was breaking inside him. "Nathan," Lawrence Harrison's voice pulled him from his paralysis. "I need to talk to you about the contract terms." Do you have a moment? Forcing himself to adopt a mask of professionalism, Nathan nodded and followed Lawrence to a quieter area of the ballroom, though every fiber of his being wanted to turn back and confront Rachel, demand an explanation for this transformation. For this coldness he didn't understand, but somehow knew he had earned. The next hour was torture. Nathan tried to maintain business conversations, tried to be present in discussions about investments and corporate strategies, but his eyes kept seeking out Rachel against his will. He watched her dance with Philip, their bodies moving in perfect synchrony despite barely knowing each other. He saw her laugh at something Leonard said, a genuine and melodious laugh that Nathan didn't even know she was capable of producing. And with each laugh, with each smile Rachel directed at another man, Nathan felt as if something was twisting and breaking inside his chest. "You're very distracted tonight," Victoria commented with a bored tone as they passed by her. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing," Nathan lied, taking another sip of his whiskey. The third or fourth of the night, he'd lost count. The alcohol wasn't helping, only making his emotions harder to control, more impossible to ignore. Finally, when he couldn't stand it anymore, Nathan excused himself from a conversation about emerging markets and walked deliberately toward where Rachel was standing next to Philip and a small group of company executives. Everyone seemed magnetized by her presence, hanging on every word she said as she explained something about resource optimization strategies, with an articulation and knowledge that made it clear she was much more than a simple assistant. "Morgan," Nathan interrupted abruptly, using his most authoritative tone, "I need to discuss some urgent matters with you. Now." The group fell silent, and Rachel turned slowly toward him. In the dim light of the ballroom, with the blue dress accentuating every curve, with her hair framing her face in a way that made it impossible to look away, she was absolutely devastating. And the way she looked at him, with that cold and distant courtesy, was like a knife straight to the heart. "Mr. Reynolds," she said with a perfectly professional voice but empty of any real emotion, "this is the company's night off. Any business matters can wait until Monday during office hours." Several of the executives exchanged surprised looks. No one spoke to Nathan Reynolds like that, especially not his own assistant. Philip seemed to be containing a smile, clearly impressed by Rachel's courage. "I don't recall giving you permission to decide what can wait and what can't," Nathan responded, his voice harder than he intended, fueled by a confused mixture of jealousy, frustration, and something that felt frighteningly like desperation. Rachel looked him directly in the eyes, without lowering her gaze as she used to, without showing even a trace of the nervousness she normally exhibited when he used that tone with her. "And with all due respect, Mr. Reynolds, I don't need your permission to have personal boundaries. I work for you Monday through Friday, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and frequently beyond those hours. Tonight, like everyone present, I'm here as a guest, not as an employee." The silence that followed was absolute. Nathan felt all the eyes of the group on him, waiting to see how he would respond to this unprecedented challenge. Part of him wanted to escalate the situation, remind Rachel exactly who had the power in their professional relationship, but a larger part, a part that was beginning to recognize with growing horror, knew she was completely right, that he had been abusing his position for years, treating her as if she were his property instead of an employee with rights and boundaries. "You're right," he finally said, the words coming out with difficulty as if he were dragging them from some deep and painful place inside himself. "I apologize for the interruption. Enjoy your evening." He walked away before anyone could respond, feeling like an idiot, feeling the curious and judgmental stares following him as he practically fled from the group. He found a quieter corner of the ballroom and leaned against the wall, needing a moment to process what had just happened, to understand this whirlwind of emotions threatening to completely overwhelm him. What was happening to him? He was Nathan Reynolds, the man who had built an empire with his willpower and unwavering determination. He didn't let himself be affected by emotions. He didn't allow people to destabilize him. And he definitely didn't obsess over his assistant just because she had suddenly decided to wear a different dress and style her hair. But even as he tried to convince himself this was just a superficial reaction to a physical change, Nathan knew he was lying. It wasn't the dress or the hair, it was the way Rachel moved with a confidence she had never shown near him. It was the brilliant intelligence she exhibited in her conversations, an intelligence that had always been there, but that he had deliberately ignored. It was the genuine warmth she shared with others, a warmth she had never offered him because he had never given her any reason to. For 3 years, Rachel had been a constant presence in his life, closer to him than any other person, knowing his schedules, his preferences, his habits better than anyone. And for 3 years, he had treated her as if she were invisible, as if her only value was her usefulness to him. He had rejected her humanity, ignored any hint of vulnerability or emotion, had reduced her to a function instead of seeing her as a person. And now, when he finally really saw her, when he finally recognized how extraordinary she was, she had stopped wanting to be seen by him. The irony was brutal and perfectly deserved. The week following the gala was one of the most difficult in Nathan's professional life, and it had nothing to do with business. Rachel arrived every morning exactly at 7 tar, as always, but something fundamental had changed. She no longer wore the gray suits that faded into the background. Now she wore clothes that, while professional, enhanced her figure and showed the impeccable taste she had always had, but had been hiding. Her hair was no longer pulled back in that severe bun, but fell in soft waves that framed her face. She had even changed her glasses to ones with a more modern frame that accentuated her eyes instead of hiding them. But the most dramatic change wasn't physical. It was the way Rachel behaved. She was still professional, efficient, impeccable in her work. But the vulnerability she used to show, that almost palpable need for his approval, had completely disappeared. Now she treated him with cold and distant courtesy, as she would treat any other boss. She no longer lowered her gaze when he criticized her. She no longer stayed late without being asked, working overtime in an effort to impress him. She did her job, did it perfectly, and then left exactly at 7 p.m., regardless of what was pending. And Nathan hated it. He hated this new dynamic, hated the distance Rachel had put between them, hated the way she no longer seemed to care what he thought of her. But most of all, he hated recognizing that he himself had created this situation, that he had destroyed something he didn't know he valued until he no longer had it. It was Tuesday afternoon when Nathan finally decided to try to change things. Rachel had just brought him his afternoon coffee and the documents to review, and was about to leave his office when he stopped her. "Rachel," he said, using her first name for the first time he could remember, "can we talk for a moment?" She stopped, surprised by the use of her name, and turned to look at him with a carefully neutral expression. "Of course, Mr. Reynolds. Is there a problem with the documents?" "No, the documents are perfect as always," Nathan responded, suddenly feeling uncomfortable in a way that was completely new to him. "I wanted—" "That is, I've noticed you've made some changes." "Changes, sir?" Rachel asked with an innocence Nathan suspected was completely feigned. "Your appearance, the way you dress, everything is different." Rachel tilted her head slightly, studying him with an expression Nathan couldn't decipher. "At the company gala, you suggested I try to look more presentable so as not to embarrass the company in front of international investors. I'm simply following your recommendations." The reminder of his own cruel words was like a slap. Nathan felt heat rise up his neck, a feeling of shame he rarely experienced. That's not exactly what I meant." "Wasn't it?" Rachel asked. And for the first time since the gala, Nathan saw a flash of something real in her eyes. Pain, anger, years of contained frustration. Because it seemed quite clear to me at the time. In fact, it's been quite clear for the past 3 years exactly what you think of me and my appearance. "Rachel, Excuse me, Mr. Reynolds," she interrupted firmly. "Unless there's something work-related you need to discuss, I have a scheduled meeting." She didn't have any meeting. They both knew it, but Nathan didn't challenge her. He simply watched her leave his office, closing the door behind her with a soft but definitive click, as if she were closing the door to any possibility of connection between them. The following days didn't improve. Nathan found himself looking for reasons to call Rachel to his office, inventing questions about his schedule or documents he didn't really need to discuss, just to have her near, to try to break that barrier of professional coldness she had built. But Rachel was too intelligent not to realize what he was doing, and responded to each of his excuses with the same polite efficiency she used for everything else. Meanwhile, Philip Harrison's interest in Rachel hadn't diminished. He began visiting the Reynolds Industries offices with a frequency that had no real business justification, and each time he did, he found a way to talk to Rachel. Nathan watched them from his office through the glass walls, seeing how Philip made Rachel laugh, how she lit up in his presence in a way she had never done with him. On Friday of that week, Nathan arrived earlier than usual and found a bouquet of flowers on Rachel's desk. Red roses, at least 24, with a card that was clearly from Philip. Something dark and possessive twisted in his chest as he looked at the flowers, an emotion he recognized as jealousy, but that was more intense than he had ever experienced. When Rachel arrived at 7, as always, she found Nathan standing next to her desk, looking at the flowers with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," she said with her new usual coldness, setting down her purse and approaching her desk. "Do you need something?" "Who sent this?" Nathan asked, though he already knew the answer. Rachel took the card and read it with a small smile that made something inside Nathan twist painfully. "Philip Harrison. He invited me to dinner tonight. And are you going to accept?" The words came out more brusque than Nathan intended. Rachel looked at him directly, and for a moment, Nathan saw a flash of the pain she had been hiding under her new armor of indifference. "I don't see how that's any of your business, Mr. Reynolds. My personal life has nothing to do with my work. He's an important company partner," Nathan argued, desperately searching for any justification that sounded reasonable. A personal relationship could complicate things professionally. Rachel's laugh was brief and humorless. "How interesting that concerns you now. For 3 years I've heard about your conquests. I've organized flowers for your companions. I've made reservations for your dates. You never worried that your personal relationships might complicate things professionally. But now that I might have a personal life, it suddenly becomes a problem." Each word was a justified accusation, and Nathan had no defense against any of them. He had been a hypocrite, selfish, and blind. "You're right," he finally admitted, the words coming out with difficulty. "I have no right to have an opinion about your personal life. But Rachel, "Mr. Reynolds," she interrupted, and the formality of the title after he had used her first name was like a reminder of the distance that existed between them. "To me, if there's nothing else work-related, I have several matters to attend to this morning." Nathan stood there, feeling helpless in a way that was completely foreign to him. In the boardroom, he could dominate any negotiation. In the business world, he was an unstoppable force. But here, in front of this woman who had been by his side for 3 years, and whom he had treated with constant contempt, he found himself completely lost, not knowing how to fix what he had broken, not even knowing if it was possible to fix it. "Rachel," he finally said, his voice softer than he had ever used with her, "I'm sorry." She froze, her hands stopping over her keyboard. For a long moment she said nothing, and Nathan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tensed slightly. When she finally spoke, her voice was loaded with a contained emotion that made Nathan's chest tighten painfully. "Why?" she asked without looking at him. "Why now? Is it because you finally see me as something more than a piece of office furniture? Because other men are paying attention to me, and suddenly that makes me valuable. For 3 years I tried to be perfect for you. I worked late, anticipated all your needs, did everything possible to earn even a little respect or recognition, and all I received was contempt. Every day you reminded me that I was ordinary, incompetent, invisible. Now that I've finally stopped seeking your approval, now that I finally see myself as someone valuable regardless of what you think, now you decide to apologize. Each word was like a dagger, not because they were cruel, but because they were absolutely true. Nathan had been everything she described and worse. He had taken her devotion and used it against her, had ignored her value until others recognized it, had been so blind and arrogant that he had destroyed something precious without even realizing what he had. Because I finally realize how wrong I was, Nathan responded with an honesty that physically cost him to admit. Because I finally see what was right in front of me all this time. And because I'm terrified of thinking I lost you before even realizing how important you are. Rachel finally turned to look at him, and Nathan saw tears shining in her eyes, though she blinked fiercely to prevent them from falling. You don't have me, Mr. Reynolds. You never had me. You had me as an employee, as an assistant, as someone who organized your life and made your day run smoothly. But as a person, as a woman, I never mattered to you enough for you to really see me. And now that others do, now that I finally have the attention and respect I should have always demanded, you think you can just apologize and everything will be fine. No, I don't, Nathan began, but Rachel interrupted him. You know what the saddest part of all this is? She continued, her voice breaking slightly. That for 3 years I was in love with a man who never saw me as anything more than a convenient tool, that I sacrificed my self-esteem, my confidence, my sense of self-worth, all for the hope that someday you would see me as something more. But not anymore. I've decided to value myself, surround myself with people who appreciate me, and move forward with my life. And if that includes Philip Harrison or any other man who's capable of treating me with the respect and consideration I deserve, then so be it. Without waiting for a response, Rachel gathered her things and headed toward the exit. I'm taking the day off, she announced without looking at him. I have several vacation days accumulated that I've never used. You can find the files you need in the shared system. Anything urgent can be sent to me via email. Rachel, wait, Nathan called, but she had already left, leaving him alone in the office that suddenly felt empty and cold despite all its luxury and ostentation. Nathan sank into his executive chair, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration that was completely unusual for him. What had he done? How had he let things get to this point? And more importantly, how could he fix them? For the first time in his adult life, Nathan Reynolds didn't have the answers. He couldn't negotiate his way out of this situation. He couldn't buy a solution. He couldn't intimidate or manipulate to get what he wanted. All he could do was confront the uncomfortable truth that he had been a terrible man, that he had deeply hurt someone who didn't deserve any of it, and that now he had to live with the consequences of his actions. During the rest of the day, Nathan tried to focus on work, but it was useless. His mind kept returning to Rachel, to her words, to the expression on her face when she finally told him the truth she had been keeping for 3 years. She had been in love with him. All this time, while he treated her with contempt, she had harbored feelings toward him, and he had been so blind, so arrogant, so consumed by his own world that he had never noticed. Or had he noticed? Now that he thought about it, there had been moments. The way Rachel looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. The way she always knew exactly what he needed, anticipating not only his professional needs but also his personal ones. The way she stayed late, even when he didn't ask, finding reasons to be near him. The small considerations, the coffee prepared exactly as he liked it, his favorite snacks magically appearing when he was working late, the careful details in everything she did for him. It hadn't been just professional efficiency. It had been care, attention, perhaps even love, and he had trampled on it again and again, too focused on himself to see or value what was being offered to him. His desk phone rang, pulling him from his dark thoughts. It was his temporary secretary, a woman Rachel had arranged to cover for her during her absence. Mr. Reynolds, you have a call from Philip Harrison. Nathan considered not answering, but finally his professionalism won out. "We put him through, Nathan." Philip's voice sounded unusually serious. "I need to talk to you about Rachel Morgan." Every muscle in Nathan's body tensed. "What about her?" "I've been thinking about offering her a position at my company," Philip said directly. "As Chief Operating Officer, the salary would be significantly higher than what you're paying her, and frankly, she's more than qualified for the position. I wanted to talk to you first, as a professional courtesy before making her the official offer." Nathan's world stopped. The idea of losing Rachel, not only personally but also professionally, of her working for another man, of seeing her every day knowing she was no longer part of his life in any way, was absolutely unbearable. But when he opened his mouth to protest, to find some reason why Philip shouldn't make her that offer, he stopped. What right did he have to stand in the way of Rachel's career? She was brilliant, capable, deserved much more than being an executive assistant for a man who had treated her terribly. If Philip was offering her the opportunity to advance in her career, to be recognized for her true value, how could Nathan, selfishly, try to stop her? "She's extraordinary," Nathan finally said, each word painful but necessary. "Intelligent, dedicated, capable of handling complex situations with an ease that's rare to find. You'd be a fool not to offer her the position, and she'd be a fool not to accept it. You have my highest recommendation." There was a surprised pause on the other end of the line. "That's unexpectedly generous of you. I thought you'd protest, considering how valuable she is to your operation." "It's precisely because she's so valuable that I'm not going to stand in her way," Nathan responded, feeling as if each word was being torn from some deep and painful place. "She deserves a chance to shine, to be recognized for everything she's capable of doing. And if I can't offer her that here, then the best thing I can do is not prevent her from finding it elsewhere." After hanging up, Nathan sat staring out the window at the city stretching below him, feeling lonelier than he had felt in years. He had built this empire, had achieved all his professional goals, had more money and power than most people could dream of. But in this moment, he realized that none of that meant anything if he didn't have someone genuine to share it with, someone who saw him as more than just the ruthless tycoon he had worked so hard to become. And the only person who had wanted to see him as something more, who had been brave enough to love him despite all his flaws, was the same person he had driven away with his arrogance and cruelty. The weekend was agony for Nathan. For the first time in years, he didn't have urgent work to distract him, no corporate crisis that required his immediate attention. And without those distractions, he was forced to confront the uncomfortable truth about himself and his life. His penthouse, which he had always considered a symbol of his success, suddenly felt cold and empty. The designer furniture he had bought without a second thought seemed impersonal and lifeless. The spectacular views of Manhattan that he had paid a fortune to have failed to fill the emptiness he felt growing in his chest. He realized, with painful clarity, that he had built a completely solitary life, surrounding himself with material possessions, but systematically pushing away anyone who tried to connect with him on a deeper level. Victoria had broken up with him on Saturday morning, though breaking up was perhaps too dramatic a term for what they had. "You've been distracted lately," she told him over the phone with her perfectly modulated voice that never showed much emotion. "And frankly, I'm no longer interested in continuing this. It was fun while it lasted, Nathan, but we both know this was never real." And she was right. Nothing in his life had been real for a long time. The superficial relationships with beautiful but interchangeable women, the friendships with business partners that would end as soon as they stopped being mutually beneficial, even his family, with whom he maintained minimal contact, treating them more like obligations on his schedule than people who cared about him. The only genuine relationship he had had, though he had been too blind to recognize it, had been with Rachel. She had been there every day, knowing his moods, anticipating his needs, caring for him in small but significant ways that he had completely ignored. And he had wasted that, had treated it as worthless until he no longer had it. Monday arrived too quickly. Nathan got to the office early, with a mixture of hope and dread at seeing Rachel. But when he passed by her desk, he found the temporary secretary, an efficient woman who lacked the intuitive understanding Rachel had of how everything worked. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," the woman greeted with a professional smile. "Miss Morgan called this morning. She'll be taking the rest of the week as accumulated vacation days." Nathan's heart sank, though he tried not to show it. Did she mention when she'd be returning? "She said she'd confirm later this week, sir." Nodding briefly, Nathan headed to his office. But before he could close the door, his phone rang. It was Philip Harrison again. "G'day, Nathan." Philip's voice sounded almost apologetic. "I wanted you to know before it became official. Rachel accepted my offer. She'll start with us at the end of the month, after she completes her notice period with you." Though Nathan had known this might happen, hearing it said aloud was like receiving a physical blow. "I understand," he managed to say with a voice that sounded strangely distant even to his own ears. "Congratulations. You're getting an exceptional employee, I know," Philip responded, and then, after a pause, added, "Nathan, if you don't mind me saying this as a friend rather than a colleague, you should know that Rachel didn't make this decision easily, despite everything. I think part of her was hoping you'd, well, give her a reason to stay." After hanging up, Nathan remained seated in his chair, staring at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Rachel was leaving. In a few weeks, she would no longer be part of his daily life. She wouldn't be there every morning with his perfectly prepared coffee. She wouldn't anticipate his needs before he expressed them. She wouldn't be there at all. And suddenly, with a clarity that almost knocked him over, Nathan realized something fundamental. He didn't want her to leave because she was a valuable employee. He wanted her to stay because he loved her. The thought was so shocking, it literally left him breathless. Love Rachel, when had that happened? How had it happened without him realizing? But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that maybe it had always been there, hidden under layers of denial and arrogance. The way his day felt incomplete if he didn't see her. The way he had memorized, without realizing it, each of her gestures, each expression on her face. The way, despite treating her so terribly, he had never been able to imagine his office, his life, without her in it. But recognizing his feelings didn't change anything. If anything, it only made the situation more painful. Because Rachel was right in everything she had said. He hadn't valued her when it mattered. He hadn't given her any reason to stay. And now that he finally realized what he felt, she was ready to move forward with her life, with someone like Philip who could offer her what she deserved from the beginning: respect, appreciation, and perhaps even love. The following days passed in a fog. Nathan discovered how dependent he had been on Rachel to function in all aspects of his life. The temporary secretary was competent, but she didn't know his preferences the way Rachel did. Meetings felt disorganized without Rachel's meticulous preparation. Documents weren't organized in the exact way that facilitated his review. Everything in his daily routine had been smoothed and optimized by Rachel for 3 years. And without her, everything seemed to require twice the effort. But what hurt him most was the personal aspect. There was no one who noticed when he was more stressed than normal and brought him his favorite snack. There was no one who remembered the birthdays of his important contacts without him having to check. There was no one who understood, just by looking at him, whether he needed space or needed someone to stay close. Rachel finally returned on Friday, and Nathan felt a mixture of relief and dread when he saw her enter the office. She looked different again, more confident than ever, in an ivory suit that made her shine like a light in the middle of the corporate office. But what impacted him most was the way she didn't immediately seek him out upon arriving, as she used to do. She simply settled at her desk and began working, as if he were irrelevant to her day. Nathan waited all morning, looking for the right moment to talk to her. Finally, around noon, he called her to his office. Rachel entered with her new confident posture, carrying her tablet and assuming it was a work meeting. "Rachel, thank you for coming," Nathan began, his voice softer than she had probably ever heard from him. "Please close the door. I need to talk to you about something important." She did so, though she maintained her distancing, standing on the other side of his desk with a carefully neutral expression. "Is it about my resignation letter? I plan to submit it formally today." "I know Philip made you an offer," Nathan said, ignoring the stab of pain he felt at mentioning it. "And I know you accepted it." Rachel nodded, showing no emotion. "It's an excellent opportunity. The COO position is something I've been working toward for years. I'm grateful for the experience I gained here, but it's time to move forward." "I understand," Nathan responded, standing from his chair and walking toward the window, unable to look at her while saying what came next. "And I want you to know that I'm not going to stand in your way. In fact, I already gave Philip my highest recommendation." "You deserve this, Rachel. You deserve to be recognized for how extraordinary you are." There was a long silence. Nathan could feel Rachel's gaze on his back, could imagine the confusion on her face at his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before. "Why are you doing this? Why suddenly being kind?" Nathan turned to look at her and let her see, for the first time, the real vulnerability on his face. "Because for 3 years I was a complete idiot. Because I had the most extraordinary person working by my side, and I was too arrogant and blind to see it. Because I treated you in a way I never should have, and now I'm living with the consequences of that." "Nathan," she began, using his first name for the first time, her voice loaded with emotion. "No, let me finish," he interrupted, moving closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "You said you were in love with me for 3 years, and I was so incredibly stupid that I didn't see it, or maybe I didn't want to see it because I was terrified. I'm terrified of vulnerability, Rachel. I'm terrified of needing someone, of depending on someone emotionally. I built all these walls around myself, convincing myself that professional success was all that mattered, that emotions were weaknesses I couldn't afford." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Rachel recognized as something he did when he was genuinely upset. "And then I saw you at that gala, and it was like being hit by a truck. Suddenly, I saw everything I had been ignoring. Your brilliant intelligence, your beauty that was always there but that I never allowed myself to recognize, your strength, your compassion. I saw how other men looked at you, and I realized that I had had the opportunity to really know you, to value you, to love you, and I had completely wasted it." Rachel took a step back, her eyes wide. "Love you? Are you saying you love me?" "Yes," Nathan responded simply, with a brutal honesty that left him completely exposed. "I realized it this week, when I thought about losing you permanently. And I know I have no right to feel this, not after how I treated you. I know I came to this conclusion too late, and that you've moved on, as you should, but I needed you to know before you left. I needed you to know that I finally see you, Rachel. I finally understand what I lost." Tears began to run down Rachel's cheeks, ruining her carefully applied makeup. "You have no idea how long I waited to hear something like that from you. How many nights I stayed late, hoping you'd notice, that you'd see beyond the facade of efficient employee. Every day was a torture of hope and disappointment, loving you silently while you treated me as if I were invisible. I know, and I'm sorrier than words can express," Nathan said, taking a step closer. "If I could turn back time, if I could change the way I treated you all these years, I would in a second. But I can't. All I can do is tell you the truth now, even if it's too late. I love you, Rachel. And if you decide to leave, I'll understand. In fact, I think you should leave. You deserve to work in a place where you're valued from day one, where you don't have to fight for the recognition you should receive automatically." Rachel wiped tears with trembling hands. "I'm leaving, Nathan. I already made that decision. I signed the contract with Philip yesterday, and it's not just about the career, though that's important. It's because I need to be in a place where I can start over, where there aren't years of accumulated pain and humiliation. I understand, Nathan said, feeling as if his heart was breaking but knowing she was right. And I'm not going to ask you to change your mind. But there's something I need to ask you, something I need to know before you leave. What? Is there any chance, any opportunity at all, that after you're established in your new position, after you've had time to heal from the damage I caused you, we could try something? Not as boss and employee, but as two people who might be able to build something real together. I know I'm asking too much. I know I don't even deserve to ask, but I need to know if there's any hope. Rachel looked at him for a long moment, and Nathan could see the conflict in her eyes. The war between what her heart wanted and what her mind told her was right. I don't know, Nathan, she finally responded with brutal honesty. Part of me still loves you, probably always will. But another part of me is so hurt, so tired of feeling less than enough, that I don't know if I can risk going through that again. I'm not asking for an answer now, Nathan said quickly. I'm just asking you not to completely close the door. That you give me the chance to show you I can be the man you deserve, not the arrogant idiot I was for 3 years. Before Rachel could respond, there was a knock at the door. It was the temporary secretary. Excuse me, Mr. Reynolds, but Mr. Harrison is here to see Miss Morgan. The moment broke. Rachel quickly wiped away the last tears and composed herself, putting back on the mask of professionalism she had perfected. Tell him I'll be right out, she told the secretary. After the door closed, Rachel turned to Nathan one last time. I need time, Nathan. I need distance to figure out who I am outside your shadow, outside this dynamic we've had for 3 years. And you need time to figure out if you really love me, or if you just want what you can't have now that I'm leaving. It's real, Nathan insisted. What I feel is real. Maybe it is, Rachel responded softly. But until we're both sure, until I can truly forgive you for all the damage caused, we can't build anything healthy. So I'm going to leave. I'm going to take this new job, and I'm going to focus on myself for the first time in years. And if at some point in the future, if our paths cross again in a different way, then maybe we can talk about this again. It wasn't a no, but it wasn't a yes either. It was exactly what Nathan deserved. Uncertainty. The same uncertainty Rachel had lived with for 3 years, waiting for him to notice her. And though it hurt, though every fiber of his being wanted to beg her to stay, Nathan knew he had to let her go. Okay, he finally said. I wish you all the success in the world, Rachel. And I hope you find the happiness you deserve, even if it's not with me. Rachel nodded, and for a moment, Nathan thought she might say something more. But she simply turned and left the office, closing the door softly behind her. Through the glass walls, Nathan watched her meet Philip, who greeted her with a warm smile and offered his arm. Together they walked toward the elevator, and Nathan watched until the doors closed and she disappeared from his sight. 6 months passed. 6 months during which Nathan was forced to confront not only the loss of Rachel, but also the fundamental truths about himself that he had been avoiding for years. Without her constant presence, without the possibility of seeing her every day, he realized how much he had depended on her not only professionally but emotionally. She had been his anchor, his constant, the only person who really knew him despite him never having opened up to her. The first months were the hardest. Nathan hired 3 different assistants, each competent in their own way, but none capable of filling the void Rachel had left. It wasn't about efficiency or skill, though all failed in comparison to the intuitive understanding Rachel had had of how everything worked. It was about the human connection he had lost, the presence of someone who genuinely cared about him beyond what he could offer them professionally. But something changed in Nathan during those months. He started seeing a therapist, something he had never considered before because admitting he needed help had been unthinkable for the all-powerful tycoon he had built himself to be. Through those sessions, He began to unpack why he had built so many walls around himself, why he had equated vulnerability with weakness, why he had been so cruel to the only person who had tried to genuinely get close to him. He discovered that his behavior had roots in his childhood, in a father who had been equally cold and demanding, who had taught Nathan that success was all that mattered and that emotions were obstacles to overcome. He had spent his entire adult life replicating that pattern, convinced it was the only way to succeed. But now, sitting in an office that suddenly felt too large and empty, he realized that all that success meant nothing without someone to genuinely share it with. He began making changes, small at first, treating his employees with more respect, recognizing their work, asking about their personal lives in a genuine way, instead of seeing them as simple cogs in his corporate machine. He started being more present with his family, calling his mother weekly, visiting his siblings he had neglected in his relentless pursuit of success. He even started doing volunteer work, dedicating time to causes he really cared about instead of just making donations for tax benefits. Through all this, Rachel remained in his thoughts. He had heard through the network of mutual contacts that she was thriving in her new position. Philip had promoted her to executive vice president after only 4 months, quickly recognizing her brilliance in the way Nathan never had. He had also heard, through the same channels, that Philip was interested in her romantically, though it wasn't clear whether Rachel had reciprocated those feelings. Each time he heard about her, Nathan felt a mixture of pride and pain. Pride because Rachel was finally receiving the recognition she had always deserved. Pain because he wasn't part of that success, because he had lost his chance to be by her side while she shined. He respected her request for distance. He didn't contact her, didn't try to seek her out, though every day he had to resist the impulse to pick up the phone and call her just to hear her voice. He knew that if there was any chance they could have a future together, he had to show her he had really changed, and that meant respecting her boundaries, giving her the space she needed to heal. It was at a business conference in Chicago, 6 months after Rachel had left, where their paths finally crossed again. Nathan was giving a keynote speech on innovation in enterprise technology, something he normally enjoyed, but that this time felt mechanical and lifeless. He was halfway through his presentation when he saw her in the audience, sitting in one of the middle rows, taking notes with that intense concentration he remembered so well. His heart literally skipped a beat. After 6 months of seeing her only in his memories and dreams, having her there in front of him was almost surreal. She looked incredible, radiant with a confidence that shone from within, dressed professionally but in a way that reflected her personality instead of hiding it. And when she looked up and their eyes met across the room, Nathan saw a flash of something, recognition perhaps, or maybe something deeper, before she looked away. The rest of his presentation passed in a fog. Nathan couldn't concentrate on his own words, too aware of Rachel's presence in the audience. When he finished and opened up for questions, it was Rachel's hand that rose first. "Mr. Reynolds," she said with a professional voice but with a touch of something warmer underneath. "In your presentation, you spoke about the importance of valuing human capital. Could you elaborate on how leaders can create an environment where employees feel genuinely valued and not just like expendable resources?" The question was direct, even challenging, and Nathan knew it wasn't just about business theory. It was personal. It was his chance to show her publicly that he had learned the lessons she had taught him so painfully. "And that's an excellent question," Nathan responded, looking at her directly, speaking to her though there were hundreds of people in the audience. "I believe it starts with a fundamental recognition. Employees aren't just resources or assets on a spreadsheet. They're people with talents, aspirations, and value that goes far beyond their immediate usefulness to the company. A true leader doesn't just recognize this intellectually but demonstrates it in every interaction." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've learned, through painful mistakes, that you can have all the success in the world on paper, but if you build it by treating people as disposable, if you ignore their humanity in your pursuit of profits, then you really haven't accomplished anything meaningful." Valuing employees means seeing them as complete people, recognizing their contributions not only when they're exceptional, but consistently, and above all, treating them with the respect and dignity every human being deserves, regardless of their position in the corporate hierarchy. He could see the surprise in Rachel's eyes, and something more. Perhaps the beginning of belief that the change he claimed to have made was real. After the presentation, Nathan was surrounded by attendees wanting to talk to him, network, discuss business opportunities, but his eyes kept searching for Rachel in the crowd. Finally, when most people had dispersed, he found her standing near one of the windows overlooking Lake Michigan, looking at the water with a thoughtful expression. "Hello, Rachel," he said softly as he approached, not wanting to startle her. She turned and for a moment, they simply looked at each other. Nathan took the opportunity to really observe her, to notice all the changes 6 months had brought. There was a lightness in her that hadn't been there before, a peace with herself that was beautiful to see. "Hello, Nathan," she finally responded, her voice warmer than the last time they spoke. "It was a good presentation. Different from what I expected from you. I've been making a lot of changes," Nathan admitted, "in my company, in my life, in myself. Changes I should have made years ago." Rachel nodded slowly. "I've heard things. People talk in the industry. They say Reynolds Industries has a much higher employee retention rate now, that the work environment has improved dramatically." "I hired an HR consultant," Nathan explained, "someone to help me implement real changes in the company culture. And I've been working on myself too. Therapy, mainly. Trying to understand why I was the person I was, why I treated people, especially you, the way I did." "Therapy," Rachel repeated with genuine surprise. I can't imagine the Nathan Reynolds I knew admitting he needed help of any kind. "That Nathan Reynolds was an idiot," he responded with a sad half-smile. "A very successful idiot, maybe, but an idiot nonetheless. And he was completely alone without even realizing how alone he was." Rachel studied him silently for a long moment. "You look different," she finally observed. "Not physically, but, I don't know, softer maybe, more human." "I feel different," Nathan admitted. Losing you forced me to confront many truths about myself that I had been avoiding. And I realized I could keep being the ruthless tycoon I had been, achieve more success, make more money, but at the end of the day, I'd be completely alone, and that kind of loneliness, Rachel, is worse than any business failure." "Nathan," Rachel began, her voice soft. "I'm not asking you for anything," he interrupted quickly. "I know you said you needed time and space, and I've respected that. But since we're here, I wanted you to know that everything I said 6 months ago is still true. I still love you. And if there's ever a chance we could try something, I'd be willing to do whatever it takes to show you I've changed, that I can be the man you deserve." Rachel looked away toward the water again, and Nathan could see the conflict on her face. "I've been happy these 6 months," she finally said. "The work with Philip has been incredible. I'm finally in a position where my talent is recognized, where my ideas are heard and valued. I've been building a life that's mine, not defined by being your assistant or by being in love with someone who didn't love me back." "I know, and I'm happy for you," Nathan responded sincerely. "You deserve all that and more. But," Rachel continued, turning to look at him directly, "I've also discovered something in these 6 months. Despite how happy I've been, despite all the professional success, there's a part of me that still thinks about you, that wonders what would have happened if things had been different from the beginning." Nathan's heart began to beat faster. "Does that mean?" "It means I don't know," Rachel said honestly. "It means part of me wants to believe you've changed, that this isn't just a phase or something temporary because you finally realized what you lost. But another part of me, the part that was hurt for 3 years, is afraid to risk it again, to go back to that place where I depended on your approval to feel valuable." I never want you to go back to that place, Nathan said fervently. I never want you to depend on me or anyone to know your worth. You're extraordinary, Rachel, regardless of what I or anyone else thinks. And if you gave me another chance, it would be as equals, as two people who respect and value each other mutually, not as boss and employee, not with any unbalanced power dynamic. Rachel took a deep breath, clearly struggling with an important decision. So, what do you propose? I'm not going to quit my job with Philip. I've worked too hard to get where I am. I would never ask you to, Nathan assured her. What I propose is that we start over, completely over, as if we were meeting for the first time, without the history, without the roles we had before. We could have dinner together sometimes, when we're both in the same city. Get to know each other as people, not as boss and employee. No pressure, no expectations. Just see if there's something real here when we're not in that toxic dynamic we had before. Rachel considered it, biting her lower lip in that way Nathan remembered she did when she was thinking deeply. And Philip? She finally asked. I've heard he's been calling you about collaboration projects. How would that work if you and I are? Whatever we would be doing. Philip is a good man and a respected colleague, Nathan responded carefully. If you decide to give me a chance, I'll handle our professional relationship with the same integrity I handle all my business relationships. And if you decide you'd rather explore something with him instead of me, I'll respect that too. Though, I'm not going to lie, it would hurt. But your happiness is more important than my feelings. That's unexpectedly mature coming from you, Rachel commented with a small smile. I learned from the best, Nathan responded, returning the smile. From a woman who showed grace and dignity, even when I didn't deserve either. Rachel remained silent for a long moment, and Nathan held his breath, waiting for her response. Finally, she nodded slowly. Okay, let's start over. But Nathan, I need you to understand something. You can't hurt me again. I wouldn't survive going through that again. So if we're going to do this, I need to know you're completely committed, that you've done the real work of changing, not just superficially but fundamentally. I have, Nathan promised, and I'll continue doing it. Because the alternative, going back to being the person I was, isn't an option. That person was empty, Rachel. He had success but no life, and I don't want to go back to that place ever again. Rachel extended her hand, a formal but also symbolic gesture. Then nice to meet you, Mr. Reynolds. I'm Rachel Morgan, Executive Vice President of Operations at Harrison Enterprises. Nathan took her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch, the promise of a new beginning. Nice to meet you, Miss Morgan. I'm Nathan Reynolds, and I'm trying to be a better man than I was before. The following months were a period of careful rediscovery. Nathan and Rachel began meeting regularly, first for brief coffees, then for longer dinners, eventually for walks through the city and conversations that lasted hours. Nathan discovered parts of Rachel he had never known: her love for modern art, her passion for Italian cooking, her sarcastic sense of humor she had kept hidden during all those years working for him. And Rachel discovered a different Nathan from the man she had known in the office, one who asked genuine questions about her life and really listened to the answers, one who admitted when he was wrong, who apologized without excuses, who showed vulnerability without seeing it as weakness, one who treated her as his equal in every sense. It wasn't easy. There were moments when old patterns threatened to emerge, when Nathan fell into controlling behaviors, or when Rachel pulled back, expecting criticism that no longer came. But each time that happened, they talked about it openly, worked through it together. Slowly, painfully, they built something new on the ashes of what had been. Philip, to his credit, handled the situation with grace. When Rachel finally talked to him about her developing relationship with Nathan, he simply smiled sadly. I always knew there was something unresolved between you two, he told her. And though I would have liked to have had a chance with you, I value our professional relationship and your happiness more than my own feelings. Just promise me that if he ever treats you badly again, you'll call me so I can beat him up." The joke eased the tension, and surprisingly, Nathan and Philip developed a genuine friendship, united initially by their mutual respect for Rachel, but eventually by shared interests and similar business values. It was on a spring evening, almost a year after their reunion in Chicago, when Nathan knew he was ready to take the next step. He had planned something special, something that would honor their journey together and the work they had both done to get to this point. He took Rachel to the rooftop of a building he had been renovating, a mixed-use development project that would include affordable housing along with luxury offices, a change in his business model that reflected his new priorities. From there, they had a spectacular view of Manhattan illuminated by the city lights. "Why did you bring me here?" Rachel asked while admiring the view. "Because this building represents something to me," Nathan explained. "It represents change. For years, I only built to maximize profits, regardless of the impact on communities. But this project is different. We're creating something that actually helps people, that contributes to the city in a meaningful way. And that's thanks to you." "Thanks to me?" Rachel asked with surprise. "You taught me there's more to life than just material success," Nathan responded. "That relationships matter, that treating people with dignity matters, that building something meaningful is more valuable than just accumulating wealth. You changed my life, Rachel, in ways you probably don't even realize." Rachel smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "You changed mine too. You taught me, though in a painful way, that I need to value myself, that I deserve respect and recognition. Without that lesson, as difficult as it was, I don't know if I would have had the courage to take the job with Philip, to demand what I deserve." Nathan took her hands, looking directly into her eyes. "Rachel Morgan, for 3 years I was a complete idiot who didn't value you. I spent the last year trying to prove I've changed, that I can be the man you deserve. And now I want to ask you something, not because I feel I should or because it's what's expected, but because I genuinely can't imagine my future without you in it." He knelt down, pulling a box from his pocket. The ring inside was beautiful but not extravagant, elegant in its simplicity, something he had chosen thinking specifically of Rachel's taste rather than impressing with the price. "Will you marry me? Not as my assistant, not as someone subordinate to me in any way, but as my equal, my partner, the person who challenges me to be better every day. I want to build a life with you, Rachel, where we can both shine, where we support each other, where one's success is celebrated by both." Tears were flowing freely down Rachel's cheeks now, but they were tears of happiness. "Yes," she said with a laugh that was half sob. "Yes, I'll marry you, Nathan Reynolds, but only if you promise to keep being this man, the one who listens and values and treats people with respect. Because if you go back to being the arrogant tycoon I met years ago, I swear I'll take this ring and throw it at your head." Nathan laughed, standing up and wrapping her in his arms. "Deal. And I give you full permission to call me out when I'm being an idiot. In fact, I ask you to do it. I need you to keep me honest, to remind me what really matters." They kissed then, under the stars and city lights, and it was a kiss that contained everything: the pain of the past, the work of the present, and the promise of the future. It wasn't a fairy tale ending where all problems were magically solved. They both knew they would have challenges, that they would have to keep working on their relationship, that old patterns would sometimes try to return. But they also knew they had something real, something they had built through brutal honesty, hard work, and the willingness of both to change and grow. And that, more than any fairy tale, was a solid foundation for a future together. Years later, when they told their story to others, Rachel always joked that it took a company gala and a complete transformation for her husband to finally notice her. And Nathan, with a humility he had never possessed before, always responded that it took losing her to realize she had been the most valuable thing in his life all along. Reynolds Industries and Harrison Enterprises eventually formed a strategic alliance, with Rachel playing a key role in facilitating the collaboration. Together, the two men who once competed for her attention became partners and friends, united by their mutual respect and shared appreciation for the extraordinary woman who had changed both their lives. And Rachel, the woman who had once hidden behind thick glasses and gray suits, who had allowed a man to treat her as if she were invisible, blossomed completely. She became one of the most respected executives in the industry, known not only for her brilliance but also for her compassion and commitment to creating work environments where everyone was valued. The story of Nathan and Rachel became legend in New York business circles. The arrogant tycoon who almost lost everything, and the assistant who refused to remain invisible. It was a reminder that true success isn't measured only in profits and acquisitions, but in the relationships we build, the people we touch, and the humility to recognize when we're wrong and work to change. And every year, on the anniversary of that company gala where everything changed, Nathan took Rachel dancing, and as they spun across the floor, he whispered in her ear the same words he told her every day. "Thank you for seeing me when I needed it most, and thank you for loving me despite not deserving it." To which Rachel always responded, "I loved you when you didn't deserve it. Now I love you because you've become the man I always knew you could be." And that, more than any business success, was the true measure of Nathan Reynolds' triumph, not the empire he had built, but the heart he had learned to open. Thank you for joining us in this story of transformation, love, and second chances. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone you think needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that touch the heart. Leave us in the comments. Do you think Nathan deserved a second chance? Has something similar happened to you in your life? We'd love to read your experiences. Until the next story.